Welcome. Welcome to this session, Keeping Kids Safe, ? There have been more than 2 decades of largely unchecked platform expansion. There's now a lot of debate whether social media, online platforms are harmful. It's really in the public mind nowadays. There are governments, courts, civil society, parental association calling for stronger checks, age restrictions, age verification, and similar measures so that kids are not prone to addictive design, harmful online content, such as non-consensual deepfakes, attention capture, or mobbing. We want to ask, how can we regulate social media more meaningfully in a way that protects young users but also doesn't introduce a lot of or any new problem? Many of the proposed solutions that are being discussed raise their own set of risks and problems. And there are issues of technical feasibility, platform power, digital rights, and surveillance. Today we want to bring together perspectives from ethics, digital rights activism, sociology, and psychology. We want to explore current regulatory efforts and what kinds of approaches we can really pursue to keep kids safe online, while also preserving democratic and child rights online. My name is Fabian Fischer. I will be chairing this session. I'm, so to say, in-house because I'm working at the Institute of Technology Assessment of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. We are assessing the impact of technology on society, economy, and ecology. And one of the topics that I have also been investigating is age assessment technologies. Our speakers today are Judith Simon. Judith Simon is full professor for ethics in information technologies at the University of Hamburg. She's interested in ethical, epistemological, and political questions arising from digital technologies. Judith is also vice chair of the German Ethics Council that 2 weeks ago published a statement on a position paper on children and youth online. She's also a member of the expert committee on the protection of children and youth in digital worlds of the German federal government that was published yesterday. And she will provide today insights from this work. Then we will have Oliver Scheibenbogen sitting here. They are sitting here because then they can see the slides better. Oliver is a clinical and health psychologist since 1996, working at the Anton Proksch Institute. It's an addiction clinic in Vienna. He's also head of the Department of Creativity and Life Design. And he, most importantly for today, also is an initiator of the Handy experiment. So it's a smartphone experiment where pupils try to live without smartphones for 3 weeks, and then reflect on this, how this changed their daily lives. Laura Wiesböck, sitting here, is sociologist, head of the junior research group Digitalization and Social Transformation at the Institute of Advanced Studies Vienna. Her research focuses on social inequality, particularly with regard to gender, labor, and digitalization. Last year, she published her book, Digitale Diagnosen, Digital Diagnosis, where she examines how social media shape perceptions of mental health. And most recently, Laura and her team developed a taxonomy to evaluate addictive design risks on social media platforms. So one of the big issues that we face. Thomas Lohninger is a digital rights activist working on issues such as net neutrality, data protection, and mass surveillance. Since 2010, he is part of epicenter.works, a digital rights NGO. He is active on a national, European, international level. For example, he's also a member of the jury for the German e-IDAS wallet and the ad hoc technical advisory group on e-IDAS on the European Commission. So also parts of the legislation and technology stack that will be relevant for today's discussion. Last but not least, we have Emma Lipka. She's studying transcultural communication at the University of Vienna and is right now finishing up her bachelor thesis. Congratulations. She plans to study journalism and media engagement, and since 2024 she has been engaged in the Youth Advisory Council of the Kinder- und Jugendanwaltschaft Wien, the Vienna Children's and Youth Advocacy Office. Similar to Shivani, she is also advocating for meaningful youth participation and children's rights in the digital age. Since the age of 14, she has been engaged in democratic processes and youth representation with a strong interest in education, digitalization, and creating opportunities for young people to actively shape their own future. For example, she is part of the UN Youth Speak Forum on Sustainable AI and was also recently at the Austrian Ministry of Media on the social media ban that is planned in Austria. Emma and Shivani will be here as representatives of those of the young people that are supposed to be protected, and they will also kick off the session with their personal, or not only personal but also representative impression of the debate and how they see it. Please, you can come on here and take a microphone.
So thank you that we're allowed to speak here today. I'm really glad. So my name is Emma, as you already know, and I personally cannot tell you much about addictive design or anything because I don't see it. So why should I watch those videos? And however, what I perceived in my family is that age does not matter. Like my parents' generation can spend hours on watching those Instagram videos, as well as the teenage generation. So I'm asking myself, protecting kids from addictiveness, does that make any sense if you don't protect adults as well? I mean, it's good if you protect everyone, but it's not only the kids. The next problem I see with bans is that everything that is forbidden becomes just more interesting in some way. You know, if I were now 13 years old and I wanted to try out social media, forbidding wouldn't prevent me, probably. I would say that I'm older, or I would take the phone of an older friend or older sibling. So what I think is better than the ban would be an education. Because if I know what danger is there on social media, I can be careful. And if I know what problems there may be, and if I know there is bullying danger, I'll be careful what to tell of myself and what not. And in that regard, I think that the digitale Grundbildung subject, digital education, which we currently have in the lower forms of our school, is already a great starting point and should be maybe extended. And yeah, that's basically my, let's call it expertise. I won't call it like that because I'm not an expert at all at anything. But yeah, that's what I would like to tell you. Education is better than banning.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shivani. Also, thank you for letting me be here. Since I'm actively in politics since I'm 14 years old, I came across a lot of social media, mostly because any opportunities has always been displayed on Instagram or in such forums. So we always tried also to get our voices out, being like in any forums or policy-making decisions. We always try to advocate for it. So it also means having to do that on social media. And with young people like in my age, we have really, really small concentration, sadly, because of TikTok and social media. I don't feel bad about saying that. It's true. I mean, I know myself, if I see a video that's longer than like 30 seconds, I'm like skipping it because honestly, I can't concentrate that long. I know, and that's actually pretty scary. And I only found that out like later because I was this generation that found out TikTok right in the pandemic. So I was doing the dances, I was watching the videos. At first it was simple, you know, a bit of creativity, seeing a few other creators, seeing like food shows or things like how to draw or to act or a few singing challenges. At first it was nice. Later on, you see how much you actually being on those apps. You scroll and scroll, and actually you just see videos with always the same kind of content. Later on, I was like thinking, why do you always see that same video or the same format? If it's like about food, then 3 hours later, it's always gonna be about food. If I like saved a video of like one party, I came across all of those parties in those videos, even if they're not my type, just because the algorithm is that strong. And those are things young people, especially kids, have no idea from, and how should they know about it? If you ban something from them, instead of explaining them, they will never know why it is banned. They will never know why we want to help them, we want to save them from it. And this is also why it's so important to make sure you don't kind of put them in a corner and say, okay, you can't have that, but not why or what is going on about or what it is. You're just keeping them locked up so they never will grow. I mean, how do you become an adult? You become an adult by doing things, by learning, even by doing mistakes, and having to see how the real world is. And yes, it is scary, because a lot of social media is really adults who know how to manipulate. Kids are not not actually the problem. It's the people on those social media apps who knows how we can use that. Especially young girls. They're being groomed, something called like cyber grooming. I don't know if all of you know what it is. Okay, I see a lot of head noddings, which is actually sad because that shouldn't be something that's like that advocated, but it is. That's when really adults use their connection on the internet to go to get close to young girls or young children, groom them, and then try to sexually assault them or get a connection with them. And children obviously don't know at first what they're doing. They're just thinking, okay, they can talk with people on the internet, which is exciting, as it should be. But like I said, if you don't educate them, they will never know why something is banned. That's why the social media ban, which in Austria we're trying to do right now, is not a good idea. If it's a complete ban, it's bad. If it's regulation, safety, what it should be, that's better. I see a lot of head that's like nice. That's why, to get to the point, we should regulate, we do safety measures so children know exactly what's going on. So step by step, they can learn all the tools that's on the internet, this is in the digital realm, and then later on get everything, but not at first. Kids shouldn't know everything about the algorithm and shouldn't be able to do everything that's on social media. But later on, they should. They shouldn't just be banned from it without explanation or help.
Thank you very much. We will continue the inputs with Judith Simon.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be back in Vienna, where I spent a lot of time in my life. So this was already introduced. What I'm going to present to you today is, of course, a short version of 2 reports which have been published and one which is not published. So as has been mentioned before, we just published the report by the German Ethics Council on social media youth protection online 2 weeks ago, and yesterday one by the Commission of the Federal Government. And on the right-hand side, I'm just mentioning this because I've just been involved as one of the experts on the special panel on child safety online at the European Commission. I'm mentioning this because a lot of decisions will be made at the European level, and the setup of this panel, so I'm going to be very brief on that, is very different from the other 2 because it is only 2 chairs, and then it had 3 meetings, as you can see here, where different people had been invited, and they will present their results in July. So just to mention this to give you a bit of an overview, I'll spend most of my time, like the 12 minutes on the left one, so don't get worried if I talk too much about one of these reports. So just to explain very briefly, so this has been the ad hoc opinion of the German Ethics Council. I'm not sure who's familiar with this board. It is a permanent body in which people get appointed for 4 years and can be reappointed for another 4 years, half by the German government, half by the German parliament. So this is not a committee that has been established on that topic, but that is a running topic, a running committee mostly working on bioethics, medical ethics, technology ethics. But in this case, we have been normally we choose the topics ourselves, but in that case, it was the German President of Parliament who approached us in October to also give advice on youth protection online, broadly speaking. So, of course, we wanted to be fast because the other committee had been established a month earlier or 2 months earlier by the federal government, and it would be odd to say something about the ethics of it after it came out. So for that reason, it was a rather short timeline. We published it 2 weeks ago. It's 50 pages. We first tried to describe the problem analysis, and also, as already some of you mentioned, there are a number of issues from which you want to protect kids online. So addiction is one, but the other is cyber grooming, it's self-harming behavior. So there is a whole, basically it's very often clustered under the 5C risks. So just to get this a bit bigger, because in the public perception, it's just about social media ban, yes or no, but actually what people are trying to prevent is much broader. So we described this first, then we provided some legal and technical background. I'm skipping the legal part here, but just to let you know, anything that you're directing at platforms need to be on a European level anyway. So whatever governments tell you that they want to do nationally, it's not going to fly anyway, right? Because you can't even target platforms with these national regulations. And then the major part of this analysis will be the ethical analysis. So I will talk briefly about this. And how we basically assess this, and then I'll provide you with the 13 recommendations very briefly so that you get the gist of what we have been discussing. So what we spend a lot of time on, in particular because in none of the committees that I've been involved was any computer scientists with a focus on privacy and security, which is very often, I think, also not a coincidence. So for that reason, I wrote a paper with 2 colleagues from computer science and a legal scholar assessing age assurance technologies, because the moment you say restricted access for minors online, you need to have a measure to distinguish between minors and adults. And that basically means all of you need to demonstrate your adults, not kids need to demonstrate their kids. This is a banality, but it's very important to keep this in mind. Whatever you're proposing means that every one of you needs to verify each time you're going onto social media that you're actually an adult. And this is why you need these technologies no matter what. Either if you want to have a ban, but even if you only want to have restricted access. So what we did is we analyzed these 4 different ways that are currently deployed also in Australia on how to distinguish between adults and minors. We also looked at the different ways of setting them up on the device, on platforms, or through third-party providers, and we assessed them all in regards to how effective are they actually from keeping minors online. What are the side effects, in particular in regards to privacy, but also surveillance, but also in terms of market dominance and other types of issues, and what is the acceptance? Okay, so just to give you the gist of it, this was, I think, important for our analysis, also for the ethical analysis. So I'm moving now. This was green in my original, so I don't know why this is now these colors, but so be it. So basically, the guiding idea for the ethical analysis was the best interest of the child. And to keep this, and this is very important, this is not only about protection, but it's about a triangle of protection, participation, and empowerment. And the problem, of course, is that these are intentions. So internally, they are already intention. Different measures to protect kids may run odds each other, but also thinking about empowerment, participation, and protection online is very conflictive. So it can't be easily resolved, but if you want to keep the best interest of the child, you need to look at all 3 of them. So what we did, it's going to be a very full slide. So the protection part is actually the one where we discussed 2 different approaches that are also currently discussed very heavily in the public. Should there be a statutory ban, basically not allowing kids online until like 13, 14, 16, what have you? Or should there be a risk-based and feature-based approach? I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Then also on empowerment, we are looking at learning and skill development in general, then also social skills and digital media skills, because we didn't only want to focus on digital media skills. And participation, this is about both digital and analog participation, but also about involving kids in these decision-making processes as well, which we didn't do, to be honest, because we had this very short timeline, but we did this in the federal government committee. Moreover, what I think is often very ignored and what we factored into the ethical analysis is to keep an eye on the complexity and dynamism of the digital world, because what I'm really frustrated in is that people keep looking at social media as if this was a fixed category and if the problems were arising from this category of things rather than from features. So one of the things we made very strong is that there are certain features in numerous digital technologies which are the source and origin of the problem, but not a class of technologies, because otherwise you're running in these discussions all the time. Should messenger systems be subsumed under social media? Should chatbots be subsumed or not? And this explains already that, thinking in terms of these boxes doesn't really help. And also what we also try to make very strong is that people are very differently affected. So also youth and minors are very differently affected depending on their socioeconomic upbringing, depending on whether they have special interests, whether they have, there are a number of factors of how kids are affected differently. Okay, so this to give you a bit of a background of how we analyze this, and now I'm going to give you our recommendations. So the first recommendation is, and the only thing that was in the media all the time is that the German Ethics Council is opposing a social media ban, right? Everything else was ignored. But this was sort of like the major headline. And I think we had a number of reasons of why we did so. First of all, we said the problem, as I said before, doesn't reside in a class of technologies, but in specific features. And they can be enabled or disabled because if you think of Roblox or Spotify, there are also ways of contacting minors in order to do cyber grooming. So I'm just trying to say it is not the type of category. The second is also that this is, I'm going to get back to the other one. So I'm just going to drop it. So basically, we've been against the social media ban for a number of reasons, arguing that it's both too narrow and too broad. Too narrow because it doesn't cover other types of technologies posing similar risks. Too broad because it impacts participation and empowerment too strongly. However, we didn't say, and this got ignored by some people, we didn't say things are fine as they are. To the contrary, what we basically said is, look, we have the Digital Services Act, which is already underlying this risk-based approach. It just doesn't work as good as it should be yet. We have to say also it's been only in place for roughly a year, okay? So it will also take a bit of time for this to happen, but there's a decided Article 28, which is focusing on exactly child and minor protection. And there are recommendations which are non-binding, which specify which features and which stuff should be disenabled the moment you allow kids on your platforms. So what we've been arguing for, that these recommendations, which are currently non-binding, should be moved up and made legally binding. And this includes features such as endless scrolls, but also these options of being contacted by people you don't know. Like all of these features which are a problem should be disabled by default the moment you set up your phone for kids who are not of a certain age. Moreover, and that was also something which I think you mentioned before, is the features that encourage excessive usage are a problem for everyone and not just for kids. And that's why we basically said, well, let's use the DSA, Article 34, to basically prohibit this to begin with. The argument being, the safer you make spaces online to begin with, the less barriers you need to protect kids from certain spaces. There will still be spaces where you don't want to have kids, right? I mean, basically excessive violence or pornography. So there is still stuff where you need to make a distinction, but we should make basically the online spaces as safe as possible by really enforcing the DSA through the means that they have. Also some other types of EU regulation, such as the Digital Fairness Act, which is not yet through, but we have the leverage, we just need to use it. So what we also said is that Gen AI needs to be much more in the focus. I think there are a number of reasons why this is not the case. At least two of them are Gen AI has been pushed into everything excessively in the last years, and now making a step back and saying, oops, it's been dangerous, what have we been doing, is going to be difficult. So that, I think, is reason number one. Second reason, it's much harder to tackle than social media, because what actually a social media ban is only focusing on is preventing people from registering for a service. It has nothing to do about people accessing anything online. So for instance, if you use YouTube and you're not logging in, nothing happens, right? So the only thing that is affected is basically you registering on something. So what may happen is that people basically bypass registration and use these other types of technology. So the AI is basically a bit out of the loop because it's also not fully covered by the DSA. So there are technical and legal reasons why people don't want to touch Gen AI, I think. The fourth, and that has been also a bit controversially received, I would say, but we basically said initially the access to the online world should be regulated by parents, who should, however, receive significantly better support in regards than has been the case. So what basically Android and iOS already should have much better on their mobile phone devices is the option of saying you can access your stuff only for an hour, for 2 hours, for 15 minutes, right? You know these types of parental control and consent features, but also to say you can only access certain types of content. This is at the moment not really perfect, right? Basically, there are tons of loopholes. Plus, what we've also been advocating, it should be more granular. Because what I currently can have a 10-year-old daughter, if she wants to listen to a song where somebody says, fuck, I either have to give her my phone or I have to opt out entirely out of child protection, right? This is not surely what we want. There should be something more granular and saying, this is a problem for me, this isn't, and accordingly set this, but also not have a way of kids to bypass this all the time. So I think this should be the first step. And if you basically set up the phone of your kid and say she is 10, then all of the non-youth appropriate content and features should be disabled by default, right? This is what this means. It doesn't mean put everything on the parents, but the moment parents set this up, it should be disabled by default. However, so this is what I already said, children and adolescents should be appropriately involved in the design of these protection frameworks, right? This is about participation in these decision-making processes. What we also said, and that's what I said, has been discussed most bluntly, that the blanket bans and other of social media and other digital services based on new statutory minimum age limit should be avoided for the reasons provided before. Instead, we need to have better parental control and consent, plus a regulation on age assurance technologies. This is now a bit more in detail, but I think it is very important because very often people don't want to deal with the nitty-gritty of these technologies. But what we basically said is what we really should avoid is any age estimation that is done on the side of the platforms because it's a privacy nightmare, okay? So it just will give the platforms more reasons to extract more data from you because they now need to definitely know whether you're 14 and 15. So what we said, this is surely what we don't want, right? So what do we want instead? First of all, as I said, parental control and consent on device. A second would be where the data stays on device, either verification or biometrics, similar to when you open your phone, but the data has to be stayed on your device, and only the signal old enough needs to leave basically the device. And the third one would be there are certain instances where it's not good enough that your device is okay, but somebody needs to check whether the person sitting in front of the device is actually also older than 18. And for those, you need this wallet type of solutions, right? You don't necessarily need it, but this is what we're recommending because it would be the privacy-friendly version for these restricted types of content. What we also stressed is there should be very strict legal requirements of what these systems are and aren't allowed to do, right? The ones for the IDAS framework are very strict, and what we're basically proposing is these should be mandatory and not be made diminished. So, last few points, gatekeeping and market dominance should be actively countered. This is a hard one, in particular when you're relying on the device level. So for this one, the OIDI is, so there is a bit of a tension in this one as well. We also argued that children and adolescents, but also the democratic process as a whole, must be better protected against forms of manipulative influence. And also, of course, what we always recommend, there should be more scientific research. But we got a bit more specific. I'm just going to dropping that here. So what, and I think the next three ones are also a bit classical ones. The conditions of acquisition of digital competence must be fundamentally improved. This is suboptimal in Germany and I think in other places as well. We actually were quite rigid on saying that the private use of digital devices should be largely restricted. Please note that we didn't say the use of private devices, but the private use of devices, which is a bit of a different story because this has a whole backlash of trouble afterwards that has been not correctly interpreted very often. And we also wanted to advocate screen-free spaces and times. And this is also, of course, has to do both with practices in families, but also fundings. So this was the long part. Don't worry. The next one is going to be short. So this was published yesterday. This was the report by the Expert Commission Children and Youth Protection in Digital World, which was established by the Federal Ministry for Education, Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth in September. So before that, we were 18 members in this one, but also observers from the federal states, but also from different federal institutions. And we already published a state-of-the-art report in April, and then yesterday the recommendations. And these are 56, which gives you a reason why I'm not going to go through the 56 recommendations. But they also, what we offered in this report is two perspectives. One along the lines of the life of children. So basically starting with the age of 0 until 18 plus. And the other is about which actors need to do what. And I'm not going to walk you through this. I just wanted to show you, like, this is the whole idea that we're starting from different phases, like what should be the rationale for kids below 3, from 3 to 6, from 6 to 9, etc. So you can find all of this online as well. And again, as you can see, there is the same trias of protection, empowerment, and participation, which has been guiding this committee as well. So I'm coming to the conclusions because I couldn't go through this report due to time. But what I can tell you before you lead it is that I think the outlook, so I've been in both committees as the only link between the two, so to speak. The outlook was mostly similar. We need to think beyond bans and balance protection, empowerment, and participation. I think this was strong in both of them. And the orientation of the recommendations, I think, mostly also similar. If you look into this, you will find it. However, there are two differences, I think. So in the expert committee, you need to keep in mind, process-wise, this was a committee that has been specifically set up by the government and only ran for roughly a year. So it's different from the Ethics Council, also meaning that the members being invited are more specifically, more people from psychology, from medicine, from pedagogy than are actually in the Ethics Council. And this also shows in the recommendations because they are broader, they go more into depth, in particular to media and psychology and medicine, as we did in our report. There is one issue or two related issues in which there are instances of dissent in the expert committee, in which there was consent in the Ethics Council opinion. So in the Ethics Council opinion, we said no ban whatsoever. In this one, we have two versions which have been presented yesterday. And as you can imagine, this always happens when there is dissent, which is fine because it's a contested issue and you just need to give reasons for doing it one way or the other. But what they also opted for is the social media ban below 13, so a rather comparatively low age in contrast to the 14 or 16. But of course, as you can imagine, I endorse the fully risk and feature-based account because the moment you say 13, you need something to implement it, which basically means that they are also recommending this part of the junction, if you speak, recommends using the OIDI wallet for ensuring that somebody is over 13. Whereas we basically said we have this layered approach, which starts with parental control and consent. Then on top, when it's getting more tricky, you may have verification and estimation on device. And for the really hard stuff, you need the wallet, which also means that you don't need to scale the wallet already very early on. So I hope this gave you a bit of an overview of what we did. I put all the references on the slide, which I'm also sharing afterwards. And now I'm looking forward to the discussion.
But before we go into discussion, Oliver will provide his input on the handy experiment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm working as a therapist since 30 years. And this slide will show you what we are thinking of an extensive smartphone use. Are we getting zombies? And these are not children, these are the older ones. So you have mentioned before. First of all, I come from the Sigmund Freud University, and please be so kind, and I want to present you one of his writings in the book Sense of Uneasy in Culture. Therefore, Sigmund Freud defined the term prosthetic God, and he had long since formed an ideal conception of omnipotence and omniscience, which he embodied in his God. He attributed to them everything that seemed unattainable to his wishes, forbidden to him. One may therefore say that these gods were cultural ideals. Now he has come very close to achieving this ideal, has almost become a good himself. And then, following Freud, he said, man has, so to speak, become a kind of prosthetic God, quite magnificent when he dons all his auxiliary organs, but they are not part of him and occasionally give him much trouble. And then this is, I think, the most important sentence, or the part of the sentence: modern man does not feel happy in his God-likeness. And this is about 100 years ago. In Vienna, we have tramways with horses at this time, and the nylon tights are invented at this time, for example. So there was a skepsis of the technological inventions. In the Anglo-American prosthetics means an addition from a neutral functional niveau in an increasing, and in German-speaking countries, prothese means a replacement after loss of some functions. There's a big difference between it. So I come from the field of addiction treatment, and for about 15 years we have the first behavioral addiction, that was the gambling. And I think we have a lot of experience in the regulation of gambling. We have a lot of experience in treatment, gambling, and I think maybe we can think if some of these regulations maybe work at internet addiction. The big five I've published is one of the first is social media or internet communication disorder. Then we have video games. Then we have the gambling. Therefore, most online gambling, that's a big problem, I think, in the discussion in the EU. Then we have online shopping. The first people I treated was bricks and mortar online shopping, and now it's bricks and mortar shopping, and now it's online shopping. And we have a lot of young male patients with cyberpornography use disorder nowadays. Yeah, that's increasing and increasing and increasing. The most pornography is seen between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. a day. Not in the evening, for example. So the prevalence rates, therefore, and the terms we use in science are not really defined so much. But smartphone addiction, we have about 30%. Then food addiction, I think it's not so a big issue in Austria, for example. Social media ban with 15%. This is a big meta-analysis. Internet addiction, sex addiction, about 10%. Gambling, shopping addiction, exercise addiction, and gaming addiction. But if you have a look at these, all behavior, excluding food addiction and exercise addiction, is integrated in the smartphone. So I think there's a really big discussion about smartphone addiction. Digital media and education, and I think that's a really important topic for the regulation. This is a survey. In Austria, we have 472 points in math at the PISA, and 1 hour a day use of digital media in the classroom in mathematics skills has an increase of 40 points. 40 points of 570 points is not so much, I think. Yeah? But if you use it more than 1 hour, there is no positive and no negative effect. And if you use it for 3 hours or more, then we have a significant negative effect. That means that we have an invert U hypothesis. That means a small amount of the use of digital media increases the skills and help learning, but there is not so much. It's a homeopathic dose, I think, in a lot of ways, not only in mathematics, and I think that will work in other fields too. This is a prevalence estimation and strategy development regarding addiction-related internet use in Styria, and I will pick out only one topic. The children were asked at the age of 14, are there some rules given by the parents? And they say, yes, there are rules, but only 18%. That means 82% have no rules from the parents. And you have told us before, the focus is on the rules given by the parents from the strategy. So why is it like this? Because, and you will see it at the right side on the screen, if there are no rules, there are only 10% conflicts with the parents once a week. If there are rules with the smartphone, we have an odds ratio of 3, that means 30% conflicts. And that means that we have to strong up the skills of the parents to place rules in the family, to enable them to discuss, and living these conflicts is very needful. In this study, they ask if the children use the smartphone after midnight on a day where the following day is school day, and you can see there is the insomnia, and that means if they use on 5 days of their smartphone after midnight, it increased the insomnia rate from 35% to 70%. Other studies show the same effect. They have a look at the moderators of relationship between screen time and mental health, and the moderators are physical activity, short sleep duration, and irregular bedtimes. And the moderators explain 40% of the variance of the anxiety they feel, and it's 26% of depression, and therefore it's 55% of behavior and conduct problems, and 52% of ADHD symptoms. That means that sleeping disorder affects or causes the mental illness a lot of time. So we have to focus on all the sleeping disorders. This is one of the longitudinal studies published in 2025, and they have a look at the mental health in the younger age in relation to the age of smartphone. And you can see we have less mental health if the children get their smartphone at the age of 5, and with every year they get the smartphone later, the mental health increases, and it increases to the age of 13 and 14, and then the negative effects of using a smartphone on mental health is not so much than in younger age. And in this meta-analysis, they have a look at other factors influencing the mental health, and the strongest you will see is the younger age of social media account, poor family relationships, disrupted sleep, experience of cyberbullying, which was mentioned before, a lack of friendship, and so on. And what are the symptoms? The symptoms are suicidal thoughts, is much more depression, and a feeling of derealization that they often have. So we have done this smartphone experiment. We have done it 1 year before with a small cohort of 60 people. And then the students request to start a new experiment. It was not our idea, it was the idea of the students and the pupils. And we have done 2 experimental groups, additional focus on reduced consumption versus total detox. And we focused on the dynamic effect because we know that peer pressure is often a good thing if you use it in this way, but peer pressure can also affect negative behavior like drug consumption, for example. And we started in January this year and finished in April this year. We have 45,656 participants, 44 male and 46 female, and the average age was about 14 years, and 50% of the control group. And we asked the children, what do you think about the social media ban? And 68% say we want a social media ban. And we ask at which age should it be realized, and the most said between 12 and 14 years. Yeah? So that, what does it mean? I think they wish a social media ban, and they are asking for support, how to handle the smartphone, how to handle social media. All 21 days successfully completed. The people who, the guys who I was alone and do it for myself, the digital detox, and the group, almost the whole class took part. If there are only a few, they took part, they are not so efficient in digital detox. And you see that is the peer pressure and the dynamic. So what are the results, the main results? The internet usage pattern decreases about 20%. The dark line is the total detox line, and the dotted is the reduced group for less than 1 hour a day. And we have an increase in mental health and mental well-being. T1 is pre, T2 is post-detox time, and T3 is 5 weeks follow-up. We have a decrease in insomnia symptoms, and the largest amount is in the degree of depressive symptoms. Then we have categorized the insomnia and the internet use and the depression. And there you see that from the CEO's questionnaire, about 70% have problematical use. Only 30% have no problematical use. In the field of insomnia, we have about 50%. They have problems with falling in sleep. And at the depressive symptoms, we have about 2/3. They have light depressive symptoms, have light depressive symptoms, or moderate or severe. So I think this is maybe caused of post-COVID and other stress factors like the wars, for example, and other things that will happen to you. The discussion is it's not only the young generation, not only Alpha and Z, it's the elder one too, but I think from the psychological perspective I have to mention the response inhibition, because we have a lot of attractive stimuli and we have to say stop I don't want to use it because it has negative effects. And the inhibitory control is the ability to control or suppress impulsive response in order to find answers through logical thinking and attention. This cognitive ability is one of the executive function and enables anticipation, planning, and goal setting. And this is located in the prefrontal lobe. And the prefrontal lobe is the region which is developed at the age of 30. So that means that response inhibition is much complex in the younger age. For example, if you took a glass the other way around, and a child of 4 years take the glass as it is, and if you are an older one, you use the state comfort. You put the glass and turn it around when you are moving the hand back. For example, this is executive functioning. So we know from the literature, reduce exhibitability of the right prefrontal cortex in heavy smartphone users. This is about 4 hours. And excessive smartphone use leads to symptoms similar to those of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorders in healthy participants. And it's siculus vitiosus because children, they are nearly hyperactivity, use a lot of more the smartphones, and the parents give them more the smartphones for relaxation, for example, and this causes ADHD symptoms. So, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just trying to figure out the slides. Okay, thank you. I will keep it very briefly. I'm going to briefly talk about the addict study that we conducted, my team and I, at the IHS. We published it around 6 months ago. And the starting point of the study was that there was a lot of pathologizing talk about the symptoms and the effects and the implications on users, but we wanted to shift the focus from users to platform practices. So we know from a variety of literature that digital interfaces and algorithms are designed to maximize user engagement. One could also say to intentionally exploit user vulnerabilities. This has many names in the literature which are describing different things or similar things like addictive design, persuasive design, hook model, and so on. And this applies to all users, as we've heard several times today, but youth, children, is more vulnerable. It's a very sensitive developmental stage with regard to brain development, impulse control, and whatnot. But it affects all users with regard, for example, to FOMO, the fear of missing out, which is enhanced by temporal pressure. Like snaps are only 10 seconds. Instagram story is 24 hours. If you don't look at it, if you don't go back to the platform, you will miss it. But then also general human desire for social belonging, for identity formation or individual expression and self-expression. As well as pressures that are created through particular mechanisms that are coming from game design and have create like reward systems and many other things. So the structural regulation we are talking about is supposed to address these tremendous power asymmetries between the platforms and the users, and I think we should ask bold and general questions. For example, should we allow, as European democracies, that US, American, and Chinese corporations create horrendous amount of public health costs and also costs for European democracies in many ways. So this goes far beyond the individual addictive behavior and mental health problems. Okay, so what we were interested in was concretely, practically looking at how social media platforms can be assessed and categorized based on their addictive risks. And what we've already heard is there is no such thing as social media. So there is, for example, LinkedIn, which is a professional network. There are video-based platforms that are focusing on leisure time and whatsoever. So we were mainly and primarily interested in social media platforms that are used by children and young people. In the European context, that's YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. And we created a traffic light system that shows whether particular features, a feature would be, for example, endless scrolling or push notifications or other features that are coming from the literature to be assessed as addictive, whether they are present or not present, first of all, whether they're present by default or you have to actively click on it to activate it, and also whether it can be mitigated. So, for example, endless scrolling is something you cannot turn off on platforms, so it would be a high risk. It's present and cannot be mitigated. So that would be the classification, the risk rating, so to say. And based on the literature, we created a taxonomy of risk assessment consisting of 55 concrete questions that can be applied to those 4 platforms. And we created 2 case studies, namely TikTok and Instagram, to demonstrate the risks. And I'm going to show you the taxonomy. I don't know if you can read it. We categorized the taxonomy into logics, features, and then questions regarding the concrete features. So autoplay, for example, a question would be, do videos start playing automatically? Which is something that is the case on TikTok and on Instagram, so it's a high risk there. Do videos loop or scroll automatically after ending? All of those questions point to features that keep people on the platform. On Instagram, you can turn that off, on TikTok not. And so on. There are various features. Hard to exit, for example, is also something that is not too broadly discussed. So if the process of logging out is accompanied by alternative suggestions, or if users are advised to deactivate their account first before they can finally delete it. And many other features we ask for. One that I found particularly interesting is also digital pets. So the question would be, are users encouraged to complete tasks to maintain the well-being of a digital pet, or otherwise they will encounter negative consequences, such as the pet freezes, cries, or dies? So this would be like a digital Tamagotchi, so to say, which you have on TikTok, but not on Instagram. And overall, I think what one can see is that most of the features are high risk on both platforms. Overall, out of 55 features, questions, items, on Instagram, 40 are high risk and TikTok 44. So that's a very clear picture. And what is also shown very clearly is that the options for mitigation is very low. So yes, so with regard to a few things that have been discussed before, in my opinion, maybe that's because of my discipline, sociology, I think media education is not the way to go. I think it has basically also a cynic character to advise people individually not to inform themselves about the media, because I myself, I would say, I know quite a lot about these addictive design mechanisms, but when I'm on TikTok, it still works. So knowledge doesn't help with regard to mechanisms with the highest prestigious psychologists creating systems that makes you dependent. So I would rather, I would rather think about structural regulation and not mainly banning, but eliminating addictive design, not only on social media platforms, but also dating platforms, shopping platforms, and so on, because it's a broader problem. Thank you. Oh, and here's the report if you want to read it, please.
Do you want to stand at the podium? Yeah. Then you can.
Already start to see.
Then we move afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really trying to be brief because so many excellent things were already said. Thank you so much for inviting me here. As was said, like I have more of a political activist perspective, so I'm going to talk a lot about power and political realities that we are facing on this issue. As you are probably all aware in this room, this is not just a national European debate. We have this debate spreading up in jurisdictions all around the world. We have the big platforms now starting to move and implementing age verification features on OS level. And all of this is not new from the privacy perspective. Many of these ideas to have mandatory registration before you're allowed to use the internet or to post something have been around over 10 years ago already. The big shift that has happened underpinning all of this is the proliferation of digital identification technologies. More and more countries have rolled out the preconditions to actually allow for these types of verifications. And we have worked a lot on the eIDAS regulation and the European Digital Identity Wallet. That is one of the tools in debate for actually providing these age verifications on a massive scale, and it's scheduled to be rolled out by the end of this year, December 24th, 2026, to have this technology in everyone's hand. And the Commission has a pathway to 30% proliferation in the first year and then 80% by the end of this decade. So this is something that might change our daily realities online quite fast. We thought a lot about age verification before we published our position here. And we, for the most part, completely agree that just tackling these prohibition aspects will not be an adequate solution. Yes, of course, we need education, but we definitely need to go much more beyond social media bans. For us, this really is a question about business models. It's the business model of Apple to sell these devices that's the more addicted a young person is, the harder it is to get the phone away from them. And of course, these behavioral patterns stick with us throughout adulthood and our whole life. And so we are not talking about anything on the device where we also would see the at least much more privacy appropriate way to tackle this issue, to say we either have government issued digital identities used for verifying our age whenever we want to open up an account with a new platform or go online at all, or we really start and stop at the platform itself. As we've heard in the EFICARD study, if we were to have this on a US-based level, when the operating system just knows in setup, this is now an 11-year-old user, and I have child protection by default, where the parents are given by default a device that is really tuned according to this age group, where an age signal that it can be completely anonymized is sent to every app, every website, and then we can even put liability on those platforms to say you have to act accordingly. You have to not show an 18 plus button for an 11-year-old user. This would even allow us to tackle the big problem, in my opinion, why we are even having this debate. We have the GDPR in force since 2018. We have the Digital Services Act in force since 2022. And as someone who has worked on these laws, who prided himself with these laws, I can just say that we have to admit almost complete defeat. Europe has failed absolutely in enforcing its legislation against international platforms and big tech. So this is quite shameful because there were so many political promises resting on these legislations, and I would say we absolutely still need them. But a fact that the European High Court has decided two times already in Schramm's cases, and the Irish courts 0 times so far, and we have seen no penalties, and even the DSA, where this enforcement is now centralized in the hands of the European Commission, we now have, I think, around 30 preliminary findings, but no real penalties with 2 exceptions. So this is also not an effective means to address these problems. And here, I think politics have realized that this problem has come to a point where we can no longer justify this inactivity. So hiding the problem from children seems a more prudent political strategy. And I know I am not helping the mood in the room, but looking at the political realities, it's also clear that Tuesday next week, the Austrian government will announce its age verification ban. So we will have a social media ban that is scheduled to go into effect even later this year. The law is not perfect, to say the least, but it will adopt some of the things that we've heard. It will, for example, tackle individual functionality. So endless scroll, for example, is one criteria. It will only be tackled for audiovisual media services. So it is built on top of the AVMS directive for the legal nerds in the room. That also means it will be completely blind for everything in AI terms. So we know the underlying business model to keep us addicted. If this is not prohibited, if the surveillance-based advertisement model is not prohibited, these functionalities will pop up everywhere. It's just a question of time and pushing it to other services, and this is really not addressing the root cause of anything here. So I wish we would have a debate like this year, and I'm very much looking forward to the panel. The example that I want to leave you with is really something that was already said by the young people at the beginning. We need to really invest much more into making the whole digital ecosystem safe for everyone, not just for young people. This is a little bit like the debate around bikes. Being on a bike as a young person is much more dangerous than as an adult. But we as society came to the conclusion that the solution is not to prohibit bikes for young people, but as a society have rules like traffic rules, clothing rules, helmet rules, and invest a lot in education, but then also in collective action problems to create a situation where this technology can be used safely at all. And I would say also to the benefit for not just children, but for everyone who uses this very old technology called biking. And I think this would be the right approach. The Digital Fairness Act might be the first legislation at European level that started at this point, where we do not try to regulate the symptoms, but really also the root causes. But in the current political climate, my hopes are very limited in terms of where we could go here. One avenue where I see much more potential for actually hitting the platforms where it hurts is litigation. Collective action also in the form of litigation, of strategic litigation and lawsuits that would hit those companies where it hurts, which is their bottom line. And with this, I'm looking forward to the debate.
Thank you. I would like now please ask everyone to join me on the panel here. We are a bit behind schedule. So I think we had a lot of quite detailed or in-depth looks at various of these aspects that we have. So it's very clear that there is an issue with mental health. I think most of you also raised the issue of responsibility, platforms, parents, society, the young people. There was also the issue of expertise. Like you mentioned that there were in one of your commissions no computer scientists, and this is also something that is interesting, like how do we want to implement it, what kind of expertise is there what are the technical feasibilities actually. We also had the issue of knowledge, that it doesn't really help against addictive design and all these patterns that are there, that this is per se is not really enough. So I would like to maybe take this expertise part and see also, because all you have a lot of expertise in your areas, and how has this been taken up actually by those, or what is your perception of how is the response by those who can actually create legislation and make these effects, because this is something that I'm quite interested in. Maybe Laura, you want to start?
Yeah, in my case, it has been taken up very well. I presented a study in Brussels within the context of European consumer protection and the Digital Fairness Act. It's going to be finalized by the end of next year. But seeing this process of like democratic structures are low, technological advancement is fast. So as a general issue, I'm not very hopeful how to basically save European democracies in the coming future, to be honest.
Shivani, you want to say something?
Like I said, 2 weeks ago was at the roundtable for social media ban, and there were a lot of youth participations eingeladen, invited you. And from UNICEF, Save the Internet, Bundesjugendvertretung, and the Youth Advocacy Office, Kinder- und Jugendanwaltschaft. And we were giving our statements about what we think is the most important things to consider, how it should be. And of course, the few politicians who were there listened, and that was about it. So, I mean, it was great to have the opportunity, but it was only like an additional point on the agenda to have some youth representatives there, make a few photos, and have that clicked off. And for me, it's a bit irritating to think a ban was only considered for youth, for teenagers and children, not any other forms of groups, and then not even have them on the team actually from the beginning to think about the regulations, because those are the experts. There will never be someone who knows more about social media or the usage of internet than the people who are doing that since they are on this earth. I mean, we are the generation who was born with it and learned it from the beginning. We are the first ones who had Instagram, had TikTok, and had Snapchat. We know what it is, and for us to only be like additionally included later on as some form of PR move is just really, I don't know how to say it nicely, but just really a waste of time from us, and honestly not productive at all, because then you can't really make a reform if you don't have the people who it's about telling you what we should do for us.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Emma.
Yeah, sure. I can only agree with Shivani. It's really important, especially in this matter concerning the young generation, that youths are actually incorporated in the decision making and not just sitting there nicely, smiling, saying some words, having a photo, and that's it. Because the government and the legislation, they do not know how we perceive it. They do not know what young people need, because I bet they are not the youngest generation in the world anymore. And researchers are a bit better because they ask, all of you have asked young people, which is already good. So you have some material to support your claims with, what I think is very good. Now we just have to make this clear to politics that they have to ask young people, and that's also what the Youth Council we're in from the Children's and Youth Advocacy, what this council is supposed to do and to show. And the goal would be that there are more such councils also in areas of politics. But for now, the goal would just be that, politics asks youth about the ban.
And maybe I can add, I think that the roundtable was last week or 2 weeks ago, and next week the law should be presentation. So it's also from the timing wise, it's of course very late in the stage. So this is also...
I think I was at the first roundtable, which was back in March. And even back then, the political decision was already made that we want to do this. It's only a question of how and if. But how and like who exactly? Yeah, what was the age limit? But the political decision was made. Similarly, you pointed out to the timeline of the European Commission, and the expert group has not even published their opinion. Von der Leyen, the Commission President, already announced that she is in favor of this. So this is not about facts.
So maybe from the German perspective, so I have to say that the German Commission actually from the outset had youth participation involved. This was also why the process took longer, but politics already went faster. So already in the last month. So they had established a commission, but nonetheless, every party had their own opinion paper on what they want. And actually, when the commission had been established, it was already in the invitation that this is already in the coalition treaty that they want to have it. And I basically said, I'm joining under the provision that this is to be discussed. So what I'm trying to say is, it is a bit tricky. There's a lot of public pressure. I think also one of the reasons why the European Commission is pushing so fast is because they are afraid that all nation states will have their own solutions, which may be contradicting. And the problem will be if we all have different rules and different regulations, but they all need to be enforced through Dublin, right? Then we have a problem. So we may end up, because this is actually the setup which we have. And I think this explains partly the rationale why von der Leyen is pushing for this. I'm not supporting this, I'm just trying to rationalize this. In terms of, I've been doing a lot of politics advice over the last decade. The question is, what do you count as a success? Because very often if you sit in these meetings, and what I see is I think a lot of parliamentarians and politicians do understand the issues. So I would say there is actually quite a high percentage that gets what the point is, but they still need to weigh and balance issues with each other. So even if they want to, let's say, protect privacy, they are thinking about industry at the same time. So observing this from close by, you see it's much harder, which is also, I have an easy job. I can criticize stuff, but I don't need to decide it. So that's something I found really insightful in observing this from close by, that it's, the decisions that are being made are not necessarily being made because people don't know, but because they are balancing this in a different way. So I'm not defending all stupid political decision-making. I'm just saying it is also a hard job.
About thinking about it, I think, like, if you say in Germany it took a bit longer, it's better to have something of quality than quantity. And to be honest, we do have in Austria those forms. We have organizations. We also have something like called the Landesschülerenvertretung. It's an embodiment of where high school students can go to the parliament 4 times a year and give you proposals. And then those kids who are being voted for can go to politicians and tell them about everything we have said in the year and what we want to have in the school systems. And you have those people, so you have actually something embedded in our constitution. So why not use those people? I mean, we have the forums, just the politicians don't take them. And we have the same thing in the EU. We have a council for young people about education and something like social media. And I think the EU has way more forms for youth participation than Austria do. And they use them more wisely than us. And I think if we already have it, why not just use it? It isn't that hard, to be honest.
I just want to add to what you said, and for a lot of politicians, it's also not stupid to be against it, but it's according to their aims and ideologies, because that's why right-wing populists are against the ban, because that's where they get their young voters from. And a lot of social media platforms are more and more entangled with reactionary ideologies, which is algorithmically reflected, and also empirically, like a study from the University of Potsdam showed that young people disproportionately will get AfD content into their feed, so we can show it on many levels. So yeah, it's also something that is wanted.
But if young people are largely incorporated in the process of installing and of deciding about this banning, maybe that would mean that they understand it better, and that would mean that they are maybe less perceptible, less, how should I say, less, that the people can reach them less, the people from the very right.
I would wish it was so. I would wish that understanding leads to different practice, but in many areas of life it's not like that, unfortunately. But in any case, I'm pro media education. We also do that in our group. We have an Instagram page where it's not about like practice-oriented media education, like how you can detect AI, but the understanding of platform capitalism. However, it's such a powerful mechanism, and it's not only about addiction, it's about dependencies. And now the topic is going to be cognitive dependencies. If you outsource the cognitive processes to AI, then you depend on it. It's not an addictive process necessarily, but a dependency, and understanding is always the first step for change, but it doesn't end there, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think you're completely right. I mean, yes, we have to be educated. That's why it's good that we have those subjects in school now. in Austria. But of course, I mean, all those companies actually depend on the algorithm and made it so perfectly that you can't actually escape it, and you actually want to be on TikTok and Insta for hours. So we have to actually regulate those and charge them and make sure that they can't really use our children and use them as their kind of money makers. So I think it's always like you need a bit from there and there, from everywhere actually.
Oliver.
I want to underline what Laura said. On the one hand, we have the ban and the regulation. On the other hand, education. And education is limited, I think, because we always think it's a kind of logical thinking, but we need to regulate our emotion. And therefore, you need so much personality skills to do it. And that's not possible to train it en passant, for example. This is a process, and it's a process which is combined with developing stages, and not everything you can educate at every time. So that's very complicated to do it. And we have a lot of patients, for example, they are older than 18 years, but from their emotional development, they are not so old. Because they have a lot of trauma, they have a lot of depression, they have disrupted family relationships and so on. And that's the problem. And we know from all this discussion of alcohol treatment, alcohol legislation, that on the one hand, a ban is not good. We know it from 300 years ago. There was a gin crisis in London where everybody starts drinking in the morning, and then the government said we have to stop this. And this was the first time they developed taxes on alcohol. And they do it in the wrong way because the taxes are so high that nobody can buy this, and nothing changed. All the London people drink a lot of, and only if at the third Gin Act they do a good regulation so that so that they can buy the license for the alcohol, and taxes are not so high, and then the drinking decreases now. And from this we learn a lot of how to handle now in the internet with it.
Maybe looking at the time, because we're very close to the end, just one question that I want to float in around. Maybe you can each have your own impression. Tom, you mentioned cycling and kids, and there are kids cyclists, but there are actually no really devices that are really for kids designed, right? I think this is something that I find quite surprising, that there is apparently no market, or it never got started. I don't know why this is. Devices that are configured by default for kids in a way that is really not as harmful as the others. So I don't know, could this be one way forward, that we say this is one way, then we don't have to regulate all the other things, but that we have dedicated devices for kids, and also as a way that they can slowly learn to engage with the digital realm?
I think absolutely. I mean, right now, that's why I mentioned the business model. It wouldn't be in the interest of any Android manufacturer, Google or Apple, to have a limiting factor in terms of the time spent on the device. The social media websites have the same approach like the Catholic Church: get them while they're young, and the longer you have them as users, the more ads you can sell them. So therefore, it is very clearly not something where the market forces themselves have led to a good outcome. Although you're right, this is a very predictable problem, and we should have done this honestly like 2 decades ago when the internet became widespread. I think actually there needs to be a sound psychological and scientific underpinning how to make these devices safe. But similarly to a privacy by design and privacy by default approach that we have enshrined in law, we should have a similar child protection by design and by default approach, where I think that parents actually should have the right to have a lot of discretion, because many things are left to the individual family to decide and not decided by law. One thing that really startles me in this debate that we suddenly want to outsource a lot of parental decisions also to the state, because most laws would not give parents the possibility to override a government prohibition with a minimum age. And if these things were to happen on device, we would circumvent many of the privacy problems, because then these would be tailored devices that have a limited scope. We do have these for pensioners. We have those dumb phones for old people. Why don't we have something that's much more like empowering phones for children that would take many of the functionalities on the device, that also prevents some of the problems that child sexual abuse regulation, the chat control proposal, tries to address.
So maybe just to add and to make this depressing for the end, but of course the problem is the business models. And if we don't address the business models, we can put patches here and patches there and build a wall here and a wall there, but nothing is going to change, okay? Nobody wants to tackle these business models because we're running on those. We're running on free services. We're running on software that we're using. I mean, we basically accepted a few decades ago that it's fine that we're paying everything through data. We're now paying the price for that decision, okay? So, but this is not, I mean, I don't see any way getting out of this, but this is the problem. And, you know, and then of course, the moment we don't have alternatives, and I hate to say, this is what we have public broadcasting for, right? I mean, these would be the entities which sort of like have an interest in providing alternatives. And that's why you have at least TV such as Kika, which is not running on ads. So, but then somebody needs to pay for it. So, I mean, just to make this very blunt, if you want this stuff, you need to pay for it. And we need to come up with different business models. And you also need fewer restrictions. Again, the moment we have these, there won't be a swap from one system to the other at the moment. So in the meantime, we need to have strong protections. Nothing, they are not changing anything for free. So there needs to be a lot of money to be paid if they don't comply, right? This is not going to happen because the moment you're asking US government, the US government is going to interfere and saying, now we're discussing taxes. So currently we're not going anywhere, but I think this doesn't mean that we can just wave with a social media ban and say we solved anything, but just having this fictitious thing in the air where nothing changes underneath. So I know it's hard. I know it's not easy. It's going to have to be a joint effort. I think really enforcing on-device, sort of like blocking of content is the right step, but we also need to work on changing some of these underlying systems, but knowing that it's going to be costly.
Maybe, do you want to add something? Otherwise, I would take questions from the room. There in the back, the woman in the back. So good. Please.
No, just a question. Are there any political processes into this direction of public platforms, so in Europe?
Do you want to sit them together?
Yes, maybe we collect 2 or 3 questions. What's one woman? Yes.
I would like to know if you heard of this big study. I think it was from Oxford University that the result was that the biggest impact on brain development in children is the social economic status, and that social media is not the cause for these problems.
Okay.
Is there any consideration that this is merely a symptom of a more competitive society that causes this escape into this alternative space where you can get what society can't provide?
Thank you. And here in the second row in the front was Tata.
Thank you so much for this panel. So in the last year in Brazil, we passed a law. So the law now has been implemented, and this law, you have like ban profiling minors. Now companies need to comply in terms of additive designs, and also they need to do a mandatory reports. So, but now with the implementation part, we have also many issues. In Brazil, for instance, we have elections, so big tech, of course, plays a big role there. Also our institutional capacity, because the authority that regulates, now they are hiring 200 people in order to be this data regulator. So you have institutional capacity, the problem, but also the political, and also the civil society in terms of trying to understand this law, trying to apply this law. So I would love to maybe say some comments or thoughts about it as well, this case study.
Thank you.
Shall I start?
Yes.
So I would be much interested in learning about the process there. So I just observed the one in Australia and what you found, and there are first results from Australia, and they are popping in now one after the other. And so I think the first one, what you could see is that surge in VPN client downloads. So what happens immediately the moment you don't have a worldwide ban, people are downloading VPN clients. So basically saying, I'm not in Australia, I'm elsewhere. So what I just this morning there was a new study mentioned, at least in the news. So I need to check the origins. That this only 4 out of 5 kids are really off social media, and 1/4 is actually still online, just under a different name, under a different age. So on the one hand, it doesn't seem to be effective. On the other hand, also in Australia, the companies can choose the mechanisms through which they identify age, which is this privacy nightmare thing. In the context of Europe, this would mean they would have a leverage against the GDPR by saying now these data to be collected is necessary for the purpose. So this is sort of like something we strongly wanted to prevent. In terms of what would be different measures, of course, there are always initiatives of building European alternatives on something. The problem is very often they don't scale, and very often they intentionally don't scale because nation states want to do their own thing. We had the same thing by language models. It would have been a big chance to have a European alternative such as Bloom, where you have something like open source, and companies all over Europe could build on top of this. What they did instead is they have a French, a German, something else. So we need to basically, decide on what to push for in order for this to scale and to be good enough, because it is hard to compete against something that runs on data and that basically can very often provide better service for free. Right? I mean, think about replacing Google Docs for scientific collaborations, right? It's usually just the easier version, and that's why people use it. So I think there are some initiatives in that direction, but we need to boost them in a very strategic way. And about the study, I didn't know this, but I think knowing the details of studies, that's something I wanted to ask you actually, because you said the kids actually want a social media ban, and I wanted to ask how old were they when they were saying yes? Because very often what you find is people say, yes, I'm for a social media ban, but only for those who are younger than I am. So that information was missing. So I am always interested in the details of the empirical data.
Yeah, I just want to add to this. I completely agree with everything you said. And regarding the VPN question, it's actually funnier because after Verkuda and the Digital Commissioner and von der Leyen announced that we now have a European solution for this, the press asked the Commission via formal channels, how would this work for tourists? And the official answer is they should use VPNs. So even if you had a global system, you will never have global alignment around our identity documents. So there will always be VPNs as a circumvention technology. And that is the one trend we see in every country, also in France, where they had this pornography age assurance bill. Suddenly VPNs are in the top 10 popular apps on every app store. So this will happen everywhere simply because there is no reality in which people on a massive scale will actually use this. The compliance will be a huge problem. And there was also this question about a political movement. As an activist, I have to jump on this. So we cannot say the name, but there will soon be a big campaign around this from digital rights NGOs all across Europe. And when next week the Austrian government will propose the legislation, it will go into a very long consultation phase of 2 up to 3 months. And there's actually, for everyone here in the room who has knowledge on this issue or an opinion they wish to express, particularly from young people, please use these levers. Please make your voices heard in these consultations. That is actually a deciding moment. And if we have enough pushback from informed people, then we could still shape this debate and the technical implementation at least, because I think at the latest, when people realize that this is not just a prohibition for children, but a verification obligation for everyone, moves will shift. And this will be something where we might even correct ourselves in the near future.
I think if there is nothing to add, we're already over time. I thank you all for being here, for your input. Sorry that we didn't have as much time as planned for the discussion. Thank you in the audience for being here. I hope it was insightful, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.